Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so been a little bit since we've had a weekend flip, but we get to talk about one of my favorite things, the Empire period in Rome, right? So when I see some of y'all will have Green Day on Monday, White Day on Tuesday, we're looking to have our test for Rome around Friday, right? So Friday probably for A, D, possibly Monday for F, just simply because it's the drop schedule and everything. But you guys are doing great. We're getting after it. You guys are doing awesome. I think y'all are going to crush this test, but let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Because truly, Caesar never dies, right? So let's go ahead and discuss the Empire period itself. But some of y'all are immediately noticing a little red flag. Some of y'all are like, wait a minute. As we all know, Caesar died in 44 BC on the Ides of March, which is one of Mr. Terry's favorite dates to ever remember ever because Caesar's the man, all right? So that is 100% factual, Lorene, all right? I agree with that all the time. But as some of you can notice, you're saying to yourself, well, this says 29 BC, 44 BC. That's a pretty long chunk of time. Well, Maggie, you would be right, all right? So that is actually a pretty good chunk of time, mainly because there was a massive amount of transition. What do you think immediately broke out after Caesar died? Of course, the Civil War, right? So, well, the war was actually started by this man, Octavian, right? So Octavian is Caesar's grandnephew, right? One of the people that he had been grooming for a long time to actually be one of the leaders of Rome, right? Now, Octavian grew up very, very intelligent, an extremely good strategist, and the thing about Octavian that I like a lot, he's not a lot of brawn, right? He was really, really tall, really, really skinny. Like somebody, if you saw him in a fight, you would immediately think he's going to lose, but he had a brain that could go for miles, right? This is another picture of him right here as well that I preferably love. It's like Octavian at, or it's Augustus at, I think it's Anatolia, but it's one of his most famous sculptures. And that sculpture itself is a little bit of a lie, right? Because Octavian wasn't actually that big, right? And he wasn't a big military guy. Well, he was a great general, but he wasn't on the front lines all the time, right? So, and we'll talk about a little story about that whole thing here in a sec. But Octavian, being his grandnephew, tries to form the second triumvirate to bring peace to Rome and also to kill the men responsible for murdering Caesar, right? Because the two big guys that we know that were the main conspirators in the Caesar murder, right, is Cassius, all right, Cassius and Brutus, right? Well, when Cassius and Brutus executed Caesar, they ran away from Rome, and they immediately fled to Greece, right? So they're out in Greece, and Rome is now currently being ruled over by the new triumvirate, right? Because it's a war, they decide to create this triumvirate and form basically a three-way dictatorship, right? And the members are Octavian, Mark Antony, one of Julius Caesar's most trusted allies, right? And Lepidus, all right? I think it's Marcus Lepidus, all right? So now Lepidus is a punk. Nobody likes him. He just kind of disappears. Octavian, though, discovers something groundbreaking right after they form this triumvirate. He discovers Caesar's will, right? Will is a document that you leave behind whenever you die, kind of discussing where all of your property and all of your effects are going to go, right? So he discovers his will, and in that will, Caesar gave him the most amazing thing he could have possibly given him. His name, right? So in this will, he basically adopts Augustus, or not, excuse me, not Augustus yet, not yet. Adopts Octavian as his son. So Octavian becomes a Caesar himself, right? So I know Durbs was like, oh, Caesar never dies, and I agree with you, Caesar never dies, right? So Octavian and his new buddies go after Brutus and Cassius, and they defeat them in Greece at a battle called the Battle of Philippi, right? So, well, there's a Philippi 1 and a Philippi 2, but Mark Antony, being the better military general, runs in and destroys Cassius and kills him in battle, right, at the first Battle of Philippi. But then Brutus, unfortunately, actually takes over Octavian's fort in his embankment at Philippi, and Mark Antony has to come and save Octavian. There's a big conspiracy, though, too, because Octavian, when Brutus invaded, wasn't there, and some people claim that Octavian ran away, kind of like a pansy, right? So, and then Mark Antony had to come and bail him out. Well, when Mark Antony shows up, and Brutus's battle is he's losing, everybody's hoping that Brutus is going to be murdered by Octavian and killed by, Mark Antony and all the other guys. He kills himself like a punk. All right, so go figure. Brutus actually tells two of his soldiers to hold his sword like this, and he runs into it, right? Paige, I know you're laughing hysterically at that, the concept of somebody running into a sword like that, but still, it's pretty messed up. Now, the Senate, after this war is over, they kind of start to resent the Caesars, and they particularly resent Octavian, right? Because Octavian is holding him up as a god, right? Octavian actually is a genius. So when Caesar died, he was studying astrology in Greece, right? Astrology and astronomy, and he was studying the stars. And Octavian actually knew that a comet was going to be coming very, very soon, right? So when he actually knew this comet was going to be nearby, he had a big, big bunch of games, right? He had days and days and days and days of games, of gladiatorial games in the Circus Maximus, right? And so while these games were going on, which also coincided with a volcanic eruption, a comet whooshed over top above all of the other people of Rome. And these games were dedicated to Julius Caesar, his adopted father. And he says, there he is, the divine Julius Caesar, becoming a god. So as you can see, Augustus is a propaganda genius, all right? So so he starts making coins and stuff like that with all this stuff about Julius Caesar being a god. And he was like, well, Julius Caesar is a god, and I am his son, so I am the son of a god, right? So, so he starts getting a lot of arrogance. He starts kind of really, really riding high on his horse. And then the second triumvirate starts to fracture, right? Because as we know, no men in Rome can share power. So when the triumvirate breaks down, Lepidus, the third guy, he's kind of lame and not important. He actually gets his lands and armies taken from him by Octavian. But Lepidus secretly tries to send a bunch of his legions over to Mark Antony because he would rather see Mark Antony win than he would rather see Octavian, right? So Octavian, though, has a huge war that breaks out with Mark Antony, because Mark Antony is secretly loyal to the love of his life, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, right? So Queen Cleopatra of Egypt and Mark Antony, who have had multiple children together, who he claims is his queen, who he says that when he dies, he doesn't want to be buried in Italy, he wants to be buried in Egypt with her, have a war with Octavian, right? Now, Octavian recruits this amazing general named Marcus Agrippa, right? And Agrippa actually helps him destroy Cleopatra and Antony at the Battle of Attica, right? And this is also, of course, remember Pompey, right? Remember Pompey back in the day? Pompey also had a son named Sixtus Pompey, who also had this huge navy, but Marcus Agrippa, being the right-hand man to Octavian, actually destroys Pompey's son's navy in the middle of Sicily and wrecks their house. So Marcus Agrippa, I'm a big fan of Agrippa, all right? Agrippa's a cool guy. Now, so eventually, though, Octavian beats Mark Antony and Cleopatra and claims Egypt as his own, right? Creating a new Rome that completely surrounds the Mediterranean. And before he actually can get to them and have them executed, because you have to understand something about Octavian, he's a big fan of executing people, he actually corners Mark Antony, and Mark Antony kills himself, right? Stabs himself with his own sword, and he dies. And then Cleopatra says, I cannot live without Mark Antony. And she reaches into a basket after she finds out he's dead, reaches into a basket, takes an Egyptian asp, which is one of the most poisonous snakes in the world, and plunges it onto her heart and dies via snake bite, right? So, how awesome is that? Now, Octavian, now that Lepidus is gone and Mark Antony are dead, becomes the new dictator of Rome in 27 BC, right? Now, some of you are like, oh, wait, so this is where the empire period starts. So he's the first true emperor of Rome. And you're right, he is. He even changes his name. Octavian changes his name to Augustus, which means higher one or respected one, right? So he changes his name to Augustus, and he's claiming to give power back to the Republic. But he actually isn't, right? So he actually established this thing known as the Principate system. So like I said, Augustus is a genius, right? He's a propaganda genius. He is a military genius. He's a strategist, right? He is he's kind of the proof that intelligence will win you the day, right? He establishes a thing actually called the Principate system, right? And in the Principate system, he is proclaimed the first citizen of Rome, or the first amongst equals, right? So he's kind of like a consul for life, okay? You understand what I'm saying? And he has absolute power over the Senate, and he can veto anything that he doesn't agree with. So in de facto, he pretty much creates a monarchy, right? So underneath Principate in your notes, put monarchy, right? Put in parentheses, monarchy. He basically says that he actually agrees with the Republic and they're still there, because he does keep the Senate, and he does keep the tribunes, and he keeps the citizen assembly, and they're there, but he has overarching power, right? And the people of Rome begin to call him the imperator, right? Now, imperator is a title given to men of Rome who are successful generals, and they've won a huge battle. But over time, the name imperator becomes the title of the leader of the Roman Empire, and eventually the title becomes the Roman emperor, right? So Augustus is the first true emperor of Rome, right? So jot that down. He is the first true emperor of Rome. And he's a genius, right? Like, he's absolutely a genius. Before he ever even did all this stuff, he actually consolidated like over 2/3 of Rome under his own rule, both geographically and in the government, right? He actually said, I am the governor of Gaul and Greece and Egypt and Carthage and all these other places, which he technically now rules directly over top of. And then also 2/3 of the senators that were still in the Senate, because the rest of them were all dead, he actually put there himself, right? He picked them, handpicked all of them to make sure that they were people that would agree with all the stuff he was doing. He's kind of a bad guy in a lot of ways. Like, if you look at Augustus, like, I love Caesar. And Augustus is like a neat person to study, but I don't love Augustus. You know what I mean? Like, Augustus is cool and all, but he's Caesar. You know what I mean? Like, so Augustus is only a genius, though, in the sense because 2 out of 3, because those 2 out of 3, like the 1 out of 3 senators that weren't loyal to him were the only ones that survived, right? So at one point when he was having a huge battle with Mark Antony, he's trying to take over those forces, there were senators in the Senate saying, we shouldn't listen to Augustus. We shouldn't listen to him. We should betray him just like we betrayed his dad, right? So, and he goes, oh, you want to play that game? And he has them all arrested, and then he has human sacrifice. Yeah, Augustus has 300 senators sacrificed in a religious ceremony. Now, in the ancient world, animals were sacrificed all the time, but you've never heard of Romans sacrificing people. But Augustus did it just so he could replace those senators with people he liked, right? So, which is a very bold move, if I do say so myself. Now, anyway, but ironically enough, he does usher in the first period of Rome that has a long peace, right? So we call this era the Pax Romana, right? Known as the years of Roman peace. It lasted for 200 years, and it's considered a golden age. Now, when I say Roman peace, were there still wars that happened during this era of Roman peace? Of course there were, right? What we're talking about is peace amongst the empire, right? No more civil wars. We've been doing civil wars now for 100 years, right? Since the Gracchi were around and post the Punic War, right? Sorry, excuse me. But it means 200 years of no civil war, right? And during this period, it's a massive golden age, right? So Augustus was considered the first true emperor of Rome, and he actually creates that whole thing. And under his leadership, the following things are accomplished, right? He makes a constitutional monarchy where the king must work with other governing bodies to follow the rules of other citizens, right? With the Senate. He actually, in the Principate system, does work with the Senate, even though, ironically enough, he handpicked all of them, but still, we're not getting hung up on that right now. Laws are going to be passed that give citizens more rights. Romans are going to be the first people to officially take a census under the Augustan Empire, right? A census is a count of how many people you have in your empire. And why did he do this? So he could have an effective tax system. Make more money, right? Make more money. So Augustus was a big thing about making all that money, right? Which is absolutely insane. Because actually, you know the whole sacrifice thing I actually said too, when he sacrificed all those senators? He actually originally put bounties out on their heads saying that, oh, if you go find one of these senators and kill them, I'll pay you. But ironically enough, he only had to pay a fraction just because whenever a senator dies, all of their wealth goes to the Roman Empire, right? Goes to the government. So every time one of them would die or every time he sacrificed one of them, he got all their money, which is genius. All right, so anyway, now, Romans are going to be the first people to take a Senate. Roads are going to be expanded, and their infrastructure is going to be massively huge. New government buildings are going to be established. I'm going to show you the Pantheon here in a minute. He's going to expand the aqueduct system, right? The aqueducts are really, really important. An aqueduct is a system of carrying water. It brought fresh water. It's kind of like irrigation, but much more intense, right? It actually carried fresh water from the mountains in the Apennines all the way down to Rome, right? And I'm going to show you a picture of one here in a sec, okay? And also, I'm going to draw you a diagram. Don't let me forget. Write down, one of y'all write down Sky. Write down real quick. Tell Mr. Terry to draw the aqueduct diagram. Now, he also creates the first professional army, which is genius. Next to professional army, all you got to do is put a little money sign. he actually made it so Roman soldiers got paid, right? So they were massively loyal to him. So something you need to understand, oh man, that piece of hair has been messed up this whole time. Something you got to understand about Augustus, his soldiers loved him, right? They loved him because he got them paid and he took care of them, right? So also he creates this thing known as the Praetorian Guard, which is this big group of men that are actually some of the highest ranking military officers that are their only job is to protect the emperor, right? So like that be the Praetorian Guard. And they become a massive influence on all things, on all things Roman going into the empire period. It's actually really insane. So the Praetorian Guard is crazy important. Go ahead and jot that stuff down. We're going to go ahead and stop right there because I don't want to take up too much of your weekend. And I got a ton of pictures to show y'all on Green and White Day, okay? So we're going to do that. We're going to play Kahoot. We're going to review a little bit. We're going to do our map quiz, right, on Green and White Day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys then. Have a great weekend.